Hello and welcome to Haunted Horsemen. When it comes to this time of year, it is always a great time for me since I enjoy the holiday and it revolves around things that I seem to talk about throughout the other months. Creepy and odd topics. However, it is a bit of a catch-22 for me in October since I naturally want to focus on Halloween style videos, but over the past 4 years I have covered a lot of these topics in great detail. Even with today's upload, I already talked about the Headless Horseman in my very first entry in the Folklore Facts series. However, in thinking about what to make this video about, I saw, in the dim candlelight of a jack-o'-lantern, that there were more horsemen waiting in the shadows, just hoping to get a chance to share the spotlight with their more famous family member. So today we are going to be looking at 4 spectral riders who are just as terrifying and fit in very nicely with our current holiday season. As a quick note, I urge you to stay to the end as I have a very special announcement. So, turn down the lights, lock your doors and windows, and listen to the tales of horses and riders who you probably don't ever want to see. Oh, and pay no mind to any sounds of horse hooves outside your house. It probably is nothing to be worried about. Hopefully. Dullahan. Starting off our list, we're looking at a being that is the Irish version of the Headless Horseman. In fact, stories of this being actually predate the tales of Sleepy Hollow by quite a few centuries. The only one that is even older is the poem about the Green Knight in the Legends of King Arthur. When we normally see the title of fairy on something, it frequently conveys a small being that flies about and can be both mischievous or purely good. However, the Dullahan is actually considered a fairy also, but this one doesn't look like anything found in fairy tales, and it is seen as a herald of death. This being is dressed in all black with a long cape. This horseman tends to ride on a few occasions, including Irish days of feast. Normally this being is seen on a horse that is said to have an abnormally large head, and it shoots sparks and flames out of its nostrils. However, there are quite a few tales that says he drives a carriage pulled by 6 horses. This carriage is covered in all types of funeral items, and the spokes are made from the thigh bones of its victims. It is said while riding in the carriage that it will be moving so fast that the heat from the wheels will cause trees and bushes to burst into flames. If this wasn't bad enough, all locked gates and doors will mysteriously open for the rider, no matter how well they are shut. While it is also headless like the famous horseman story, this one isn't on a mission to find its head, since it carries it with him. In saying that last part, I should mention that there are both male and female versions of the Dullahan. The head is said to be resting on a saddle, or it will hoist it into the air. It is described as having a sickly yellowish smooth skin that looks like moldy cheese. Its mouth is in a broad smile that stretches unnaturally from literal ear to ear. It produces a glow of light, and it has tiny black eyes that are constantly moving back and forth. The rider will hoist the head in the air for 2 purposes. It provides light for the path, and the eyes are said to be able to see across the countryside, being able to find where its victims may be, even behind closed doors. The Dullahan carries with it a whip that is said to be made of the spinal cord of one of its victims. If a person happens to see the rider, it will either dump a bucket of blood on them, or in a worst case scenario, use its whip to blind one of the person's eyes. You see, this being doesn't just randomly choose a person to die, it sets out with a name in mind. It is said wherever the horseman stops, that is the exact location that someone will die later, and it will be accompanied with a name. Otherwise, it will ride right up to the front door of the victim it has, and call out the person's name, which in turn kills the person immediately, and the soul of that person joins the Dullahan. This being is said not to be able to talk, other than saying the person's name, and it can only do this once during its ride. What makes this really odd is that as of recent times, some car accidents are said to be the work of the Dullahan. In some retellings of the legend, it is said that objects made of gold will scare off this fairy. It still seems odd saying that. While not everyone agrees this will work, I guess anything is worth a shot if you find yourself out at night and spot a headless horseman coming down the road. Knuckleby. Here we have another famed rider, and this one comes from the Orkney Islands in Orcadian mythology, which is in the northern islands of Scotland. Ireland and Scotland sure have some terrifying monsters. I have talked about this creature before, but I couldn't rightly remove it from this list since it fits so well. And I guess I like to talk about it also. This being is known to be a purely evil entity, which is rarely the case for most mythological creatures. The creature actually makes its home in the sea, and while there, it is said to take on another form, but no one knows what that looks like. What is known is the appearance while on land. It is said to be massive in size, and is the combination of a horse and rider together. Many describe the rider as if he was literally growing from the horse's back. The man has a huge head that is said to be 3 feet in diameter. It doesn't possess any legs, and its arms are so long that they drag on the ground. And its head jostles from shoulder to shoulder as if it was about to fall off. The horse has a huge mouth, said to be the size of a whale's. One eye is in the center of its head, and it is said to burn red like fire. And the breath is toxic, which causes plagues and death. The creepiest feature is that both horse and rider are said to not have skin, but you can see the exposed red muscle and the black tar-like blood that flows through yellow veins. Most stories state that this being caused a disease called mortashine when the islanders started burning seaweed to help fertilize their crops. This disease killed livestock and crops and spread to any island that also burned seaweed. Most stories I saw mentioned this beast causing plagues or even being responsible for a drought, but I didn't see where this terrifying creature actually harmed a human directly. That is, until reading about the encounter a man named Tam O'Shanter, or Tamas for short, had with this creature, and survived to tell the tale. In fact, most of the details about what this creature looks like comes from this man's encounter. It is quite a long story, and I will provide a link to the full retelling in the description, but I will summarize it. One night while walking home, he saw the being in front of him near a loch. Knowing he couldn't outrun it, he decided to face it down. Just as the creature was opening its mouth, Tam accidentally splashed some of the fresh water in the loch onto the creature when he stepped down, bracing for the bite. The Nuckelavee reared back in fright, and Tamas took this opportunity to make a break for the nearest stream. The whole time the creature was galloping after him, trying to grab him with its long arms. Finally, at the stream's bank, Tamas leapt to the other side, and in the nick of time, since the creature was trying to grab him one more time, and managed only to snag the man's hat. The beast roared, knowing it couldn't cross the fresh water, and left. This makes me wonder if the reason there are no reports of what the creature does to humans is because of the old saying, "Dead men tell no tales." However, all is not lost when facing this foul beast, since it has a very useful fear, and that is of fresh water. It is said that if chased, crossing a stream would cause the Nuckelavee to stop in its tracks, since it can't follow you. It also is said that the beast will not emerge onto land if it is raining. According to lore, the protective spirit of summer days, called the Mither o' the Sea, confines the Nuckelavee in the sea during the summer. It is said that if she didn't do this, then the beast would continually attack the island. Yachtend. Moving on to our next being, we're starting to go into a realm that isn't so much about the rider, since the horse is more prominent. However, these horses require a rider for them to complete their activities. Our next creature doesn't have a lot written about it, but I think you will find it as interesting as I did. This being is one of the rarities where it actually doesn't want to kill or harm innocent people like most other creatures we talked about. However, I will say that being its main targets are thieves. While I don't agree with that behavior, I do think the punishment is a little harsh for the crime. This being is found in Irish folklore, and it is said to appear like any normal horse with no telltale signs that it is anything different. Its goal is to rid the world of all evildoers, and it will wait until someone tries to steal it. After this, the horse takes off running, and then bursts into flames, causing the rider to catch fire also. It is then said that the criminal is now convicted to ride the horse forever, all the while being burned and able to feel the pain constantly. It is unclear how it manages to keep the thief on its back, but maybe they get burned together. In one famous story, called The Voyage of Okora, some travelers came across a man on a horse, who tells them that he once stole his brother's horse, and after that point, the Yachtend showed up and forced him to ride it for eternity. All the while, it burned the man. It appears that being a thief isn't the only crime it will target, and it also is assumed that the activity doesn't have to involve a horse. Kelpie and Anoushka. Now I know there are many of you who may be thinking with seeing this last two, he said he was only talking about 4, but here is 4 and 5. You are certainly correct, but when looking at these two beings, they are frequently tied together. Every article about them makes a point to say that they are normally written about as one and the same, but they are not. When you look into the details of them, they really do seem like the same creature. I made it my mission to figure out what set them apart, especially since they're from the same culture, so I couldn't just say they were different people's versions of the same thing. While the differences are minute, there is enough to make them unique. I am putting them under the same heading, not to appear that they are one and the same, but for the fact that, for the most part, if I separated them, I basically would be telling you the same story twice. These creatures are found in Scottish folklore, and are both considered a water spirit known as a water horse. The Kelpie is said to live in the rivers and streams, while the Anoushka makes its home in the sea and lochs of Scotland. Both beings are said to be able to take a human form. The Kelpie normally chooses to be a beautiful woman in a green dress, or as an old man. There are stories of it becoming a handsome young man, but not many tales agree with that. On the other hand, the Anoushka predominantly takes the form of a handsome man, and uses this trait to woo unknowing female victims. It should be noted that it can also take the form of a giant bird as well. Many stories state that even in the human form, a telltale sign that it isn't a human is due to seaweed or sand being stuck in the person's hair. The Kelpie is said to be a very powerful black horse that has a unique trait of having its hooves turned backwards. This characteristic is something that remains even while in human form. Both beings have one main goal, and that is to entice someone into getting onto their backs, where they will in turn immediately run to the deepest part of the water. Their skin becomes like glue, and their unwary victim is drowned in the process, since they cannot escape once they get on the horse. The beings then devour the human, with the Kelpie leaving only entrails remaining, while the Anoushka eats everything but the liver. Now here is where the two start to become different in their stories. The Kelpie prefers to stay around the water, where a passerby may assume it is a lost horse and then attempt to take a ride, which we all know how that works out. The skin on the being immediately turns sticky, and everything is over at that point for the victim. Now, the Anoushka tends to travel inland frequently, and in many tales will even allow itself to be put to work as a farm animal, just waiting for the moment that anyone tries to ride it. When this does happen, it can be safely ridden and controlled to a degree while inland. If at any point this creature sees or even smells the water, it then turns its coat to glue and takes its rider to the deepest part of the water. Many consider the Anoushka more ferocious than the Kelpie, but from what I've found, this doesn't seem to fit, especially figuring that the moment you sit on a Kelpie, it is all over. It is said that the Kelpie can lengthen its back to accommodate multiple riders. In one famous story, 9 children were riding on a Kelpie at one time, while another boy watched them. At one point, the boy reached out to pet the horse's head, to which he immediately became stuck. Realizing what was happening, the boy quickly cut off his stuck finger just before the horse plunged into the water. Later it is said the entrails of the others were found floating near the shore. He is one of the few who are said to have survived an encounter with the Kelpie. Now jumping back to the Anoushka. It is said that this creature will eventually attack its own kind if the scent of a previous rider is still strong enough. In an interesting story, one man described coming across the human form of the being. The man knew what the creature was, and that it was about to try to capture him. So he fired his gun at the being, but even though his shots hit, it didn't faze it. The man then loaded a silver coin into his gun, and with this shot, the Anoushka immediately jumped into the water. It is said that people who walked along the shores were very wary of any lone animals or strange people that they saw, for fear of it turning out to be one of these two water horses. I do want to quickly note that in many of the origin stories of the Kelpie, it is said to have struck a deal with the devil, and in doing so, it is delivering its victims' souls to him. In this, it was required for the riders to voluntarily get on the horse, rather than the Kelpie just grabbing them from the shore. So after all that, you can clearly see why I put these two together, and at the same time, why they can be considered different. I do wonder if they could be the same breed, but one is just taken to hunting for prey more inland. Before leaving this topic, I did want to make a big announcement, which I originally planned to do last week, but became a little edit crazy when I realized the Bell Ghost was going to require more time than I had planned. Anyway, last week, Meme Cage asked, will there be a Halloween special? I am happy to say that I am going to be doing a live stream Halloween special on the 27th at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This also is a special event to celebrate the fact that you have gotten our channel to over 30,000 subscribers. I do have a few special things planned, and also, there is a rumor that as long as everything works out properly, I may be having someone else on the stream. So again, this is going to be next Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see all my cryptid family there. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this, and also I'd greatly appreciate it if you could share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!